Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
The Lord never forgets us, my child. We shall never be able to thank Him for all His kindness. How long our separation has been, but you mustn't think that I had forgotten you. Sometimes Providence parts us temporarily so that we may learn divine love. Please continue watching to find out more.
Don't choose vegan, hell suits you better.
Kia ora koutou, friendly viewers. Kia ora koutou is how people say hello in Cook Islands Maori. I'm Amiri. With love and appreciation in our hearts, the joyful people of Cook Islands pray that such wonderful friends as you may continue to shine in peace and blessings. Man is not forsaken on earth. He is a child of God, engaged in constructive work, temporarily clothed in flesh. He is a student in a meritorious school where he must learn to raise himself up. The human struggle is his opportunity, his set of tools, and his textbook. How childish to imagine that the mere ringing down of the curtain, physical death, would settle transcendental questions of the infinite. One life is but a single act, one body a garment, one century a day, one task an experience, one triumph an acquisition, one death a breath of renovation. How many lives, how many bodies, how many centuries, how many tasks, how many triumphs, how many deaths are still allotted to us? These astounding messages from the spirits via a human medium convey the message of Spiritism. Spiritism emerged in the mid-19th century through the findings and philosophy of French educator Hippolyte Léon Denisard Reveil, also known by the pen name Allan Kardec. Contemporaries of Allan Kardec included Spiritist philosopher Leon Denis and renowned author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. According to the principles of Spiritism, God is the supreme intelligence, eternal and all good. The human soul, while destined for ultimate perfection, must undergo successive incarnations of spiritual progress based on effort. Thus, the Spiritist's goal is to explore the nature, origin, and destiny of the soul, often through afterlife communication as conveyed via a human medium. These afterlife insights, including an understanding of the soul's immortality, have been transcribed into Spiritist books. One such volume is No Solar, or Astral City, conveyed by Spirit Andre Luiz through Spiritist medium Francisco Cândido Xavier. Francisco Cândido Xavier was a Brazilian philanthropist who co-authored more than 400 books, donating all proceeds to charity. One of his more famous works, Astral City, describes a spiritual society as stated from the afterlife by former medical doctor Andre Luiz. Astral City describes not only the continuation of life beyond the physical body, but more importantly, how heaven cares for each and every human soul. The following excerpts from Astral City emphasize love as the transformative principle that uplifts all souls in the universe. Chapter 15. My Mother's Visit. Following Clarence's advice, I tried hard to restore my strength in order to start my apprenticeship as soon as possible. In the old days, I might have taken offense at the minister's seemingly harsh remarks, but under the circumstances, recollecting my past errors, I could only feel comforted. As a prisoner of the flesh, the soul is almost always wrapped in thick mists of illusion. Only now did I realize that an earthly life cannot be lived thoughtlessly. The real importance of an incarnation loomed clearly before my eyes. Remembering all the opportunities I had wasted, I recognized that Clarence had plenty of reason to have spoken to me as he had. I spent many days immersed in contemplation, although I refrained from asking for any more concessions. Deep in my heart, I longed to visit my earthly home. The benefactors of the Ministry of Assistance had been extremely generous to me and seemed to follow all of my thoughts. Therefore, if they did not spontaneously grant such a wish, it must be because the time had not yet come for it. Thus I held my peace, resigned, though somewhat wistful. Lysias did his best to cheer me up with his lively conversation and encouraging remarks. But I was going through that phase of spiritual retreat, when a man retires within himself to face his innermost conscience. One day, however, my attendant came into my room and exclaimed, "Guess who has come to see you?" Lysias's smiling face and sparkling eyes gave him away. "My mother!" I exclaimed confidently. Stunned with joy, I saw my mother approaching with outstretched arms. My child, come into my arms, my dear one." I cannot describe what happened then. All of a sudden, I felt like the little boy who used to play in the rain, barefoot in the sandy soil of our garden. In that sacred and joyful moment, I held her tenderly in my arms until even our tears blended. I cannot say how long we remained that way, but at last she broke the enchantment. Now, my boy, don't give free rein to your emotions. You know that even excessive happiness taxes the heart. You are still weak. Do not waste your energy. Instead of carrying my dear old mother in my arms, as I had done in the last weeks of her passage on earth, it was she who dried my tears and led me to the couch. I sat down beside her and laid my head tenderly on her knees. She stroked my hair gently, recounting precious memories. I felt at that moment that I was the happiest of men. I had the impression of being anchored in the safest of harbors after a hard struggle on the stormy seas. My mother's presence was a great comfort to my heart, and those moments seemed like a blissful dream. Like a little boy looking for comfort in familiar objects, I attentively observed her clothes, a perfect copy of those she used to wear at home. I recognized the dark dress, the blue shawl, the stockings. I gazed at her small head crowned with snow-white hair, at the wrinkles on her face, at her invariably sweet and calm expression. Speechless and trembling with joy, I stroked her hands while she, stronger than I, spoke serenely. "The Lord never forgets us, my child. We shall never be able to thank Him for all His kindness. How long our separation has been, but you mustn't think that I had forgotten you. Sometimes Providence parts us temporarily so that we may learn divine love." Feeling that her affection was the same as ever, I began to recall again the sting of old grievances. Oh, how difficult it is to get rid of earthly residues. How heavy is the burden of centuries of imperfections. Clarence had often exhorted me to refrain from lamenting. Lysias, too, had spared me his warnings. Yet now, resting in my mother's arms, all my old wounds seemed to bleed again. I started to bitterly recall my past sufferings, and my tears of joy gave way to those of self-pity. I did not realize then that her visit was not to be taken simply for the gratification of my whims, but as one more blessing from divine mercy. Relapsing into my old habit of making my mother the patient victim of my endless grievances, I now began to painfully recount all my past tribulations. On earth, mothers are often merely slaves in their children's eyes. Very rare are those who realize the value of their mother's devotion before being deprived of it. I had been no exception. My mother listened in silence, her face clouded by an expression of indescribable sadness. Holding me tight to her heart, her eyes full of tears, she spoke tenderly. "Oh, my son, don't complain. Didn't our generous Clarence give you sound advice on that subject? Let's be thankful to our Father for this blessed meeting. Let's never forget we are now in a different school, learning to become true children of God." As a mother on earth, I didn't always succeed in guiding you in the best way. Therefore, I too am working to control my feelings by readjusting my heart. But your tears are stirring my old earthly feelings, drawing me back into a path I have already trodden. I should like to believe your complaints justified to set you up as the most virtuous creature in the universe, but it would be out of accordance with the new lessons we are learning. In the world, one might make allowances for such behavior. Here it is quite impossible. We must consider the Lord before everything else. You aren't the only discarnate man redeeming his errors, nor am I the only mother parted from her loved ones. The merit of our suffering, my son, doesn't lie in the tears it makes us shed, nor in the bleeding wounds it inflicts on us, but in the gateway of light it opens up to us. Tears and wounds are only a blessed means of helping us to purify our soul. After a prolonged pause, during which my conscience addressed me firmly, she resumed, "Why not enjoy these fleeting moments in the sunshine of love, instead of wasting them in the shadows of unhappiness? Let's serve, my child, and serve cheerfully, while at the same time constantly rejoicing in the Lord." Change your mental attitude, I beg you. Your confidence in my love and your affection for me bring me sublime happiness, but I can't return to experiences which have passed. We must love each other now with the great and sacred divine love. Those inspiring words awakened me, and I had the impression that my mother's love radiated invigorating fluids which lifted my heart. She gazed at me contentedly, transfigured by a radiant smile, and as I rose and respectfully kissed her forehead, it struck me that I had never before seen her so beautiful and so loving. The following excerpts from Astral City emphasize love as the transformative principle that uplifts all souls in the universe. Chapter 18. Love, the Food of Souls. As soon as the prayer was over, Laura invited me to the evening meal, which consisted of invigorating broth and fragrant fruits, which tasted more like a delicious blend of concentrated fluids. I heard Laura remark genially, "After all, our meals here are far more agreeable than they were on Earth. We have some districts which dispense with them together, but in the zone of the Ministry of Assistance we can't do so. Here the heavy tasks we perform consume a great deal of our energy. Hence, we are obligated to be continually making provisions of energy. That, however, added one of the young ladies, doesn't mean that we who work at the Ministries of Assistance and Regeneration are the only ones to depend on food. The other ministries, including Divine Union, don't dispense with it. The only difference in the food is the nature of its substance. In communication and elucidation, fruit is widely used, while in elevation, juices and concentrated fluids are more common. As for the Ministry of Divine Union, the process of nutrition goes beyond the imagination. Eager for immediate explanations, I shifted my gaze from Lysias to his mother. Everybody smiled at my natural perplexity, but Laura satisfied my curiosity. You may not be aware, my friend, that love is the major sustaining element for all creatures. From time to time, large delegations of instructors come to visit our city in order to convey the principles of spiritual nutrition. Love is the fundamental basis of all systems of nourishment in the different spheres of life. Physical diet, properly considered, is always a question of transitory materiality even here, as in the case of the earthly machines that need grease and oil. Love, and only love, is the source of sustenance for the soul. The more we ascend along the evolutionary plan of creation, the more thoroughly we understand that great truth. Don't you think that divine love is the mainspring of the universe? Those explanations comforted me considerably, and Lysias added, God's infinite love is the center of equilibrium of all creation. The more evolved the created beings, the subtler their processes of nutrition. The worm in the ground feeds mainly on earth. Larger animals find the necessary elements for nourishment in plants. Man gathers the fruits of these plants and prepares them according to his taste. We, who are already free of our physical bodies, need fluidical, juicy substances. The process becomes even more delicate as we advance in our ascent. But we mustn't forget the question of vehicles, Laura added. For after all, worms, animals, man and ourselves depend exclusively on love. We all move about in it, and no existence would be possible without it. Don't you remember the gospel lesson which says, love one another? When Jesus taught this principle, he didn't refer only to charity in its strictest sense, for we shall all have to learn, sooner or later, that the practice of good is simply a duty. He meant us to understand his words in a broader sense, that is, to sustain one another through brotherly love and sympathy. Sometime in the future, man on earth will discover that friendly words, mutual kindness and trust, understanding and fraternal interest, all fruits of deep love, are stimulating nourishment to life itself. When on earth, burdened by a physical body, we are under great limitation, but on returning here we realize that lasting and harmonious happiness is a question of purely spiritual sustenance. Homes, villages, towns and nations are formed in obedience to such principles. Instinctively, I remembered the sex theories so widespread in the physical world, but Laura, recognizing my thoughts, remarked, "You mustn't imagine that it is merely a sexual phenomenon. Sex is a sacred manifestation of universal and divine love, but it is only one of the many expressions of its infinite potential. With the more spiritualized couples, tenderness and trust, mutual devotion and understanding count far more than physical union, which is reduced to merely a transitory activity between them. It is magnetic exchange that establishes the necessary rhythm for the manifestation of harmony. The mere presence of the loved one, and sometimes a simple understanding, is sufficient to nourish a feeling of joy." Availing herself of a lull in the conversation, Judith added, "We learn here in the Astral City that love is the hub of life on earth, yet most people never realize that important truth. Twin souls, kindred souls, and sympathetic souls form numerous pairs and groups. By gathering together and assisting one another, they succeed in advancing along the road to redemption. When, however, help is lacking, a weaker person usually fails before completing the journey. As you see, my friend," remarked Lysias, "even here we are reminded of the gospel lesson, man shall not live by bread alone. The ties of love are stronger and more beautiful here. Love, my friend, is the divine bread of the soul, the sustenance of the heart.
Vegan, 'cause there's no better way to show that we are humane.
Warm-hearted viewers, we appreciate your company today for words of wisdom. May you always cherish the purity of your spirit in the abundance of wondrous blessings from heaven.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/WOW.